Okay. You okay there? Yes, that's fine. Yes, yes.
They're good. Yeah. They're not sleeping. They're good.
No, dates. Quarter past.
Just show the progress.
Right, welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed the salmon or whatever, and it's good to see such a healthy number for the afternoon session. We're scheduled, the Commissioner had a little bit of a delay getting here because of the weather, which we can do nothing about. She's scheduled to leave at 4:15, so we'll aim to conclude by then, and we'll get straight into it. So I'd like to welcome the EU Commissioner for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, Ms. Maria Damanaki, to the meeting this afternoon. And I know she only got here this afternoon, so I hope she's settled. I'm especially enthused to hear more about the reform of common fisheries policy, which will aim to ensure long-term environmental, economic and social sustainability of agriculture in the EU and beyond. The Oireachtas Joint Committee on Agriculture and Food and Marine raised the issue of discharge of Minister Coveney several times over the past year. I know it's something that has been relevant to all countries, and I'm glad that agreement has been reached on a phased ban on discards in EU waters from 2014 onwards. The reform of the common fisheries policy will have a major impact on maintaining a sustainable fishery, and its importance cannot be overstated. I'd like to welcome Minister Coveney back to the session as well. I know he's been over with the Young Farmers Conference on the other side of the city in between the morning session and this afternoon. So I now, without any delay, call on Commissioner Damanaki to make her opening address.
Thank you, President. Dear Simon, dear members of the Parliament, I would like to thank everybody who arranged this meeting. This is a real opportunity for me to be again here in Dublin for this meeting with the members of the national parliaments. And I think that it's very, very important that our meeting is taking place here at such an historic setting like Dublin Castle. So this venue had seen many important changes throughout Irish history, and perhaps this is the perfect place to discuss about another change. This is the change of our common fisheries policy. I know from reading the position papers of the committees of national parliaments that you have already discussed our proposals about a new fisheries policy, and in general you have endorsed the change. I think that everybody around the table can agree that what we need is sustainable fishing by respecting the maximum sustainable yield principle, by stopping wasteful discarding and taking decisions closer to citizens via regionalization. So I would like to give you my sincere thanks for your efforts, and please continue to be involved. So let me share with you some information about the procedure of adopting this new policy. The Council of Ministers has now agreed a general approach on the new policy that includes all of the above. They agree to achieve maximum sustainable yield by 2015 where possible, and by 2020 the latest. They agree to a phased-in discard ban with no exceptions. They insist in phasing in solutions such as de minimis and year-to-year flexibility. Council also agrees to start with fisheries where the discard ban is easier to introduce, and to end with other fisheries where we may need more time for the implementation of the landing obligation. The general approach of the Council also includes regionalization, voluntary fishing concessions, and a set of principles for new external policy that follows the same way we fish in our waters and respects human rights. So you can understand perhaps why I am so pleased, because our ambition is kept, the proposal of the Commission is there. So let me at this stage thank Simon Coveney for his steer, which allowed Council to come to finalize the general approach. I'm also very happy to inform you that the landslide vote in the European Parliament, with over 500 votes across all political parties in favor of an ambitious reform, was very important for us. And also the European Parliament has set the level high for both MSY and the discard ban. They to endorse regionalization and the new external and market and labeling policy. Ladies and gentlemen, these are radical changes that mean a U-turn, a real U-turn in the way we fish. The co-legislators are bringing together widely diverging views, coming up with compromises that have broad support. Let me say that this is not an easy job. So what lies ahead of us after all this? We now are moving to the trilogues where Council and European Parliament will have to agree on the final outcome of the reform. This is going to be a tough job for everybody, but especially for the President, Minister Simon Coveney, but I have all the faith to him. And I can promise to you that I will support him and the Irish presidency so that we can have a good outcome with the real reform as soon as possible. If we can do this by June 2013, there I will be more than happy. But what is most important is that we don't lose sight of the essentials and not give in to voices that seek a watering down of the ambition of the reform. So I hope that we can really rely on you to send this message to your governments. Also, I can see that you can play a very important role because you are very close to our fishermen and our citizens, especially in coastal areas where fisheries is very, very important. So you can explain what we are doing. You can persuade them that what we are doing is profitable for both our fishermen and the sea and the environment, because the healthy stocks can bring more fish in our nets. This is the only way to get more fish in our nets, to have healthy stocks in a good situation. And I'm here to explain it to you with concrete figures, how much we are going to get more if we are going through sustainability. Also, better labeling and marketing can bring more income and jobs to our fisheries sector, and here we can help, you can help us a lot. So to move to this new reality is not easy, of course, and I'm here to assure you that our fishermen, we are not being alone in this procedure. We are not going to leave them alone to take all this transitional period and this burden. We are going to provide them with our support, so we have proposed an important financial package of structural aid to help fishermen and fishing communities face these challenges and to ensure that these changes are complemented with active policies to promote growth and jobs in coastal areas. This proposal of a new Maritime and Fisheries Fund is now being examined by the European Parliament, which has scheduled the adoption of their first reading position for June. The Council already adopted a partial general approach in November 2012 and will complete its position in April. So we can expect the trilogues on this proposal to start sometime in July this year. Your opinions will be also very welcome on this, how we are going to spend our money, and I hope that during the trilogues under the Lithuanian presidency, we can also meet and exchange views about this issue. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner. I now ask Minister Coveney to make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome once again. I hope you had a good lunch. I'm glad you're eating Irish salmon. Can I say, just in relation to the conversation that we had this morning, we are equally ambitious as a presidency to try and get as much done in terms of decision-making at a European level for the common fisheries policy as we are for the common agricultural policy. We made significant progress to that end 2 weeks ago in a council meeting that was long and difficult, but where we agreed and endorsed a common position on the general regulation of the CFP on behalf of the Council, where 26 out of 27 member states supported that position, which is actually an even stronger vote than in the Parliament. And that was after 23 hours of debate and discussion and compromise. But we did not compromise on the core issue here, which is to fundamentally change the way in which we manage fish stocks, to fundamentally change the way in which we apply science to the maintenance of healthy stocks. That is what we're talking about when we are talking about fishing to maximum sustainable yield by 2015, where possible, and by 2020 at an absolute limit. Significant things are happening and changing across the European Union in terms of how fishing will progress over the next 5 to 6 years. And I think the benefits of that will be significant both for the fishing industry but also for people who are concerned as to the broader issues around overfishing and so on. In this current round of the Common Fisheries Policy, clearly policy initiatives that have been introduced in some areas have not worked. Some of the byproducts of the current policy show significant failures. I think the best example of that is the level of discarding that takes place of perfectly healthy and marketable fish. In some fisheries, up to 60% of what's caught is actually dumped over the side, dead, because fishermen do not have a quota to land that stock. In some cases it's juvenile fish, in other cases it is other species of adult fish that fishermen have caught in their nets but do not have a quota to land. The average discarding rate is about 23% across the European Union. But if you look at the waters that I'm most familiar with in terms of European waters that Ireland has the responsibility for monitoring, the figure is about 40%. That means about 400,000 tonnes of fish each year, maybe more, dumped over the side dead. I think everybody, fishermen, to the broader industry, to NGOs that are concerned about the environmental impacts of this, to everybody else who informs themselves about how fishing works in the European Union, everybody accepts that we must do something significant and serious to change discarding practices. And we have done that. We now have a clear commitment that starting from next year, at the start of 2014, the pelagic sector will introduce an obligation to land everything they catch, in other words, a discards ban. From the start of 2015, in the Baltic, all of the fishing there will have an obligation to land or discards ban. In 2016, the Western Waters, which is the waters around this island and on the western coast of the EU, will introduce a discards ban or an obligation to land, and in 2017 it will be introduced in the Mediterranean. And with the exception of the pelagic sector, there will be a 3-year phase-in period. So in other words, you start with the main species of fish in that fishery, because where a discard ban gets complex is when you are actually trying to introduce it in a mixed fishery, where a fisherman may be catching 3 or 4 or 8 or 9 different species of fish in the one net. And even with technical measures in terms of mesh size, in terms of escape hatches and so on, it is still very difficult to separate adult fish that are the same size, at the same depth, being targeted in the same nets. And so there are real complexities around how we introduce an obligation to land on our fishermen, and they need time to adjust, and they need transition mechanisms to actually adjust to make sure that they can do what we would like them to do and remain within the law. And so that is why it has taken time to figure out how we can do something substantial to improve the sustainability of fishing, while at the same time get buy-in from the industry and work with the industry to make sure that in practice at sea this new policy actually works, rather than it being an enforcement nightmare for all of us in terms of the cost of that enforcement and the effectiveness of that enforcement. Because let's face it, when a fishing boat is 50 or 60 or 100 miles off our coast, it is very difficult to enforce an obligation to land unless there is buy-in from the sector that it is the right thing to do and that they can operate within the rules. And that is why we have the flexibilities that have been agreed, in terms of flexibility year to year, in terms of some flexibility in terms of species to species, in terms of quota management, and of course the de minimis levels that were agreed also at Council. So we have made our decision in terms of our position. The European Parliament has also made their position clear in a very clear fashion. The Commissioner has remained consistent in terms of what she wants to achieve, and so now, starting next Monday, we are moving into a trialogue process to move, as we are in agriculture, I hope, in the not too distant future, to move towards a final political agreement in June on the general regulation around CFP reform, in terms of the policy initiatives, the financing of that reform through the European Fisheries Fund, essentially, or the EMFF, will be finalised in terms of trialogues during the Lithuanian presidency that will follow the Irish presidency. So this is an exciting reform. We need to get it right. In my view, we are getting it right, but we need to finalise that process now. And that brings me to your role in all of this. Because just like in agriculture, when you actually finalise a European policy through the mechanisms that are there and the institutions that are there to do that at a European level, it then falls on member states to actually implement those new rules and regulations effectively, to work with industry in our own individual countries to make sure that what we aspire to do in terms of the overall policy actually happens on the ground. And the support systems that are in place in terms of domestic policy need to mirror what we are trying to do at a European-wide basis. And whether that is new approaches in terms of more targeted fishing, or indeed whether it's other initiatives that we can take to keep coastal communities intact through the transition years that we are talking about, well, then we all need to think about how best to do that in our own countries. But ultimately, what this is about is ensuring that there are more fish in the sea to catch. In simple terms, that's what this is about. And that we would protect fish stocks to such an extent as we would ensure that they are being fished at sustainable levels, so that those stocks can grow and expand, and our industries can grow and expand with them, to ensure that we maintain stimulus and job creation in coastal communities that may have very little other options available to them. And actually, I think there is some correlation between the countries that have the highest levels of unemployment at the moment in the European Union and coastal countries, like Ireland, like Spain, like Portugal, like Greece, like Cyprus, countries that have huge economic challenges in the future, but also have significant fishing industries and significant coastal communities that need optimism for the future in terms of where their industries are going. And I think that this CFP reform can do that. I really do. And I am committed to trying to get that policy finalised with Maria and with the European Parliament by the end of the Irish presidency. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now take the first group